The camera?
Is it running?
Oops.
Well, that was cool. I like the way you did
totally,
that.
totally knocked it off. It was an icebreaker,
Get
Dad.
away from the
Okay.
microphone so you don't bang it.
Okay,
Is it running now?
it's running.
Okay. My name is Kenneth John Leahy.
Okay.
I'm the son of John Patrick Leahy and Placida May Leahy. I was born in Cleveland, Ohio, 24th of February, 1937.
1937. What was going on then in 1937?
The Great Depression.
The Great Depression. Okay. How do you feel like that affected you as you were growing up?
Well, I'm what I consider myself to be a Second World War uh, mentality.
Okay. What does that mean?
Well, we were more interested in the country being saved from the Germans. We were interested in working together for a goal. After my time, or after my youth, came the baby boomers and the Me Too generation and things of that nature. But I always considered myself, even though I was a little young, a member of the folks that worked to save this country from the Germans and the like.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way I always ran my life, is what's good for the country, what's good for the family, not what's good for me, and that sort of thing.
Okay. Well, we'll move into, I know you were in the military. We'll digress from that, but did you go into the military because of that belief? Is that why?
Well, I've often said the reason I went into the Marine Corps was because Uncle Paul, during the Second World War,
Mm-hmm.
who was a Marine, let me shine his shoes. And Paul impressed me. He was a fine man, and I felt that I never thought I would spend 20 years in the Marines, but as it worked out, I did. But I wanted to go in, and I was always going to be a Marine almost all my life.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. You went into the Marines, how old were you?
17.
17 years old. Was that normal then?
Well, that's as young as you could go.
Uh-huh.
You had to have your parents' consent, which I got gleefully. Um, and a lot of folks did. And generally, when I was in high school or in that age bracket, you did one of two things. You went to college after high school, or you went in the service.
Mhm.
There was a draft on still, and so you had no choice but to go, one or the other.
Okay. Well, we're going to digress a little bit more into your youth. Can you first tell me about your earliest childhood memories?
Well, not so much, I guess, as memories, but my earliest situation was that I was an asthmatic, and I was a very sick child, and I spent the first 9 years of my life in not real good health. Other than the memories that I have are being short of breath, not being able to play quite as hard as I would have liked to because of the asthma that I had.
Really? So how did that affect you in the family? I know you were the
Well, I was
second
the
oldest?
second oldest of two. There was only two of us at that time. Later on, some more children came along, but as a youngster, I was the youngest, and I was greatly loved and coddled by my mother and father, and had a wonderful set of parents who only wanted for me to have a good life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How about school memories or playmates?
Tim Conley was my earliest friend.
Is he still alive?
I don't know. See, we left Ohio when I was 9 years old.
Okay.
But Tim and Hank Kodak were two kids I can remember, and Vince somebody or other.
Uh-huh.
They lived on Wayne Avenue with me in Lakewood.
Yeah.
Um,
What kind of games did you play?
Kick the can was a big game with us, and maybe hide and seek,
Mm-hmm.
things of that nature.
Mm-hmm. But you had a hard time with your asthma playing?
I had not a hard. I mean, it was at the time it didn't seem hard, but I was just restricted. I would be sick in bed and that sort of thing. I had allergies, so I would swell up. Didn't have a real fun childhood, but I was too dumb to know any different, I suppose. And things worked out all right. We had a good time.
Yeah. Can you give me your earliest memories of your household, like your houses and your neighborhood?
Yeah, the first house I remember was sold, I believe, to the dentist who was supposed to have killed his wife. That was in Bay Village.
And this is Ohio? Bay
This is
Village, Ohio?
Bay Village, Ohio, which is outside of Cleveland.
Uh-huh.
And we sold our house to this doctor. He's a famous murderer, supposedly, and then he was found not guilty in that. I can't remember the guy's name now, but that house, I remember, it was out at the time, really out in the sticks. We had wooded areas behind our house and on either side of it.
Mhm.
And I was very young then, probably in my, I don't know, first memories, 4 or 5, whatever that would be.
What home do you consider, or house do you consider home?
Well, 1518 Wayne Avenue, which is in Lakewood, which is a little closer to downtown Cleveland, but still out from downtown,
Mhm.
was the one that I remember as being my childhood home. Of course, I spent a great deal of time in the house. We moved from there to Tucson,
Mhm.
and I lived a great deal of time there. But I guess Wayne Avenue is the one I remember, and I remember laying on the front porch of Wayne Avenue and looking at the numbers that were nailed right at the top of the stairs.
Mhm.
And that's how I can remember it and still see the address.
What color was the house?
It was white, like almost every house then, and I suppose it had a kind of a gray trim. It had a large backyard. The lot wasn't particularly wide, but it was very, very deep. And my father built a garden in the back. They called them victory gardens in those days, so that people could have food to eat and still allow all the greater amount of things to go towards the war effort, feeding our troops and the like.
Now, before you moved to Arizona, what did your family do for fun?
Well, we did a lot of things together. I can remember going for hikes with my dad and walks. He would take not only us, but anybody who wanted to come. We would take walks, and we played in a group of kids. You know, there was, like I say, there was Tim and Hank and Vince, whatever his name was. I don't remember anymore. And 2 or 3 other kids in and out of it. We played some ball. We ran up and down the cobblestone street there on Wayne Avenue, and I had an aunt who lived over Aunt Lang, and I would go over to their house on occasion. And my grandmother had a big house on Clifton Avenue in Lakewood, and I used to go by there from time to time. And often we would go to Ohio, or go to Canton, Ohio, to my father's home where he was raised, and we would have 25, 30 people there. He had like 13 brothers and sisters, and they had, of course, a lot of them were married and had kids, and so it was always a great deal of fun to go there on the weekend.
So you spent a lot of time within your family.
Well, we did a certain amount, a good bit of that, and then, of course, played with my friends, like I say.
Were your
And
friends always coming over to your house, or were you going to
both.
theirs?
It was a kind of a back and forth sort of thing, because we all lived right close together. We also had a thing called Rocky River, which is a valley that runs very near the house, and we used to get down there and play.
Yeah.
Fell in through the ice there.
Ooh.
When I was a kid.
Was that life-threatening?
No,
Or that-
it wasn't deep enough to be life-threatening.
It was just real cold?
Sure, cold.
The ice was too thin. What kind of chores did you have to do around the house?
Well, actually, I think probably just the normal things, clean your room and pick up after yourself and do some form of cleaning around the house. My dad was a very efficient housekeeper, as well as my mother, and really, we'd help with the dishes to some extent, clearing the table and that sort of, but we didn't have, we were very easy lifestyle as far as having to do a lot of work. My dad loved the garden, so we didn't have a lot of problems with the lawn mowing and that sort of thing, and probably a little young for that at that point anyway.
Yeah. How did we can move into like Arizona? And we'll talk about how that move affected your family structure. You moved to Arizona because you had asthma.
Right. What happened is my aunt Ethel married a fellow by the name of Vince and Allen, and they moved to Arizona. Because of my health, I was sent out, or taken out. My dad drove us out there in a little Crosley, which is a very, very small sub-compact car, which came out right after the end of World War II. And we drove all the way out there in this little thing, and there wasn't enough heat, and the heater was a water-powered heater inside the car, and there wasn't enough heat to get all the way into the back seat. It was It was a fun ride. We used to take turns sitting up in front with our mom and dad, and the other one would be all rolled up in a blanket in
In
the
the
back.
back
to
seat.
keep warm.
Oh my
And,
gosh.
and we ran through Texas, hit a snowstorm, and they got so much snow up underneath the fenders of the car that there was snow all the way around the tire, and so it was, the tire was being worked on from the road as well. We had to finally stop and kick all the ice out of the fenders, and it was quite a different ride than you do today on the freeway. Everything was all 2-lane roads and not
Well,
not anything like access control or that sort of thing.
Oh my
So,
gosh.
but
How
it was
long
a
did the
fun-
whole trip take?
Well, I'm not really sure.
No.
We stopped in various places, had a lot of fun too
Yeah,
on the
yeah.
way. We stopped in Florida, we stopped in New Orleans, and various other places along the way. Just a regular family trip.
Wow. So that's when that was your big transition to Arizona,
That's
and
when,
from there you
that's when,
stayed?
right. And I then Mom and Dad and Larry, my older brother, they went back home to Cleveland and left me with Vince and Ethel,
Uh-huh.
and they took me into their home graciously and
They
became
drove
my,
back in
my
that
mother
car?
and father.
Is that
Oh
what
yeah,
they
they
did?
drove back, sure.
Wow.
They stayed, and I went to school there,
Huh.
and my health improved almost immediately.
Really?
Yeah. It
So
was,
physically you felt better, but how was it emotionally for your parents to
what do
be
you
in
mean?
Ohio?
For my parents?
Yeah,
or
to
for
be
me?
for you.
Well, I
to be
had
away
it
from-
fine. I had a great home to stay in. I had great people taking care of me.
Yeah.
I didn't have any problems at all. My dad bought me a .22 rifle
Oh gee.
and let
How old
Vince,
are you?
9,
No.
and let Vince teach me how to shoot it.
Uh-huh.
I had no complaints. I got to ride Jerry, a horse, up at the Tumbleweed Stables. It was a fun year.
Yeah.
And you'd wake up in the morning and see burros and what have you wandering through the front yard, and
Yeah.
horses, and it was, and cattle from time to time.
Oh wow.
It was a fun place to live. We were out near the medical center there, and at that time there was hardly any other homes out there,
Mhm.
maybe half a dozen or so.
Mhm.
So it was wide open range country, and a great place for a kid.
So do you feel like you clicked better with Arizona than in Ohio? You
No,
felt- No?
no, I liked Ohio too. I clicked pretty well everywhere I go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Huh. Talk to me about who of your parents was the disciplinarian?
Well, the statement my mother often made was, "Wait until your father gets home."
Mhm.
My mother probably ran the house, definitely ran the house, but the person whom we all had the most fear/respect for was my father.
Okay.
My father was a man's man,
Mhm.
and I don't think that he ever had to raise his voice to get me to do anything, ever.
Mhm.
Where with mother would holler and do the things that some women will do from time to time, lose her temper and what have you. And it wasn't that I wasn't respectful of her, but she was so little that she didn't frighten me very much. I knew she wouldn't kill me, but
She
I
was
wasn't
tiny.
too sure about my dad.
Yeah.
I didn't know how far I could push him ever.
Uh-huh.
And but he was a wonderful man and raised us, gave all of his life to raising his children.
Uh-huh. Tell me about your relationship first with your mother and your relationship then with your father.
Well, I was a headstrong, smart aleck punk, and probably gave them a lot more trouble than they needed. In fact, I know I did.
Mhm.
But the love was there
Mhm.
in all regards. I
Mhm.
never ever didn't love my mom and dad,
Yeah.
even when I'd run away from home, which I did a few times.
Mhm. Where did you go when you ran away?
Well, both times that I left let me put it this way. The first time I left home, I went to stayed with Babe and Pete, which were friends of mine down the street. They were
Uh-huh.
not too far away from where we lived,
Uh-huh.
maybe a mile or so. And I spent 4 or 5 days with them, and then finally went home, of course.
Uh-huh.
And the next time, there was overnight stuff. I'd run away and that sort of thing. When I was in my probably 13, 14 range,
Yeah.
15, stuff like that. I went to work for a rancher for a few weeks,
Uh-huh.
and never really amounted to much, and I finally ended up back home again.
Huh. So what prompted you to leave? You were just angry at
Oh, I can't even remember what the situation was. I just couldn't do what I wanted to do.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
I wanted to do this, and they wanted me to do that. I hated school. They wanted me to study and all this sort of thing.
yeah,
I was never a good student.
Yeah.
I didn't do well at all in school.
yeah.
I got by. I flunked the second grade, and then I passed up and through the ninth grade when I quit school altogether. I was able to get through each year. Sometimes had to go to summer school, but I didn't like it. I caught spinal meningitis when I was in that range, 13, 14, somewhere in there, and had a big fight with one of my teachers who gave me a failing grade.
Wait, I don't
in a
understand. You said you
course.
caught spinal meningitis?
Yeah, I had spinal meningitis.
Isn't that fairly serious?
Yeah, it could be, but it wasn't for me.
Uh-huh.
I was out of school for quite a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he gave me a failing grade rather than incomplete,
Oh.
which I thought was unfair, and I was always worried about fair. I wanted everybody to treat me fairly. I didn't want nobody trying to take advantage of me.
You needed
And that
to.
was always my big thing, and usually why I got in trouble at home, too,
Because you weren't being treated fairly.
in my opinion.
Uh-huh. What were your favorite ways to get in trouble?
Well, I don't know that I had any favorite ways. I played hooky on occasion, and I started smoking at an early age, probably 9 or 10.
Mm-hmm.
And all of those things don't help you much. It wasn't that I was, well, I guess I was, but I wasn't a really bad child. I was respectful of other people's property pretty much. And I don't think I was, I didn't go out and vandalize places or any of that sort of thing. But I just wanted to run my own life at a very early age, much too soon.
Was that the same with your siblings? Did they want that too? Or?
Larry was a completely different soul than me.
Uh-huh.
He is probably has a 250 IQ. He's a genius rated IQ. Never had any problems. And when mom and dad would tell him to do something, he always immediately agreed to do it and did nothing.
Uh-huh.
I, on the other hand, complained and bitched and moaned and did it. But Larry was too bright to ever get into a really major argument with anybody because he was smarter than them. And usually he got his way no matter what.
Huh. What about your other siblings?
Well, when we got out to Arizona, then we had 5 other children. And let's see, we'd start off with Helen and Andrew.
They're twins.
Well,
right?
actually, Wade. We'll talk about Wade first. Wade was the next oldest. He was about 11 years younger than me. I
Okay.
got to spend a lot of time babysitting him and the other kids.
What was that like?
Which I didn't really like very much.
Yeah.
That was one of the things I didn't want to do, and
Uh-huh.
naturally, but basically did a lot of that anyway.
Uh-huh.
It was, just drag them around to my friends' houses and just kind of get them out of mom's hair.
Uh-huh.
And I don't think that I had any particular problems with the kids.
Uh-huh.
I was probably a little bit too authoritarian. Well, I was quick to spank
Yeah.
when they didn't do what I told them. So,
Uh-huh.
which is not too good, but that's the way it was.
Uh-huh.
The way I was anyway.
Uh-huh. Huh. Okay. All right. Dramatic pause. Who would you go to for permission in your family if you wanted to go somewhere? Which of your parents would you go to?
Well, my dad, because my dad would never say no to anything unless mom had already said no.
Okay.
Unless I want to go out and jump off of a rock. My dad was pretty easy going as far as as long as you weren't going to do something crazy, But he didn't care what you did as long as you weren't breaking the law or staying out after sundown or whatever the rules were to follow.
So, who lined up with who in family squabbles? Was there a pairing system or ganging up system or?
No, my mother and father were one person.
Okay.
If one of them said no, it was all over.
Okay.
That's why you wanted to be careful who you asked. And if one said yes and one said no, then you didn't do it either.
What if? Oh, you didn't do it. But what if did you try to ever work the two against each other? I mean, and what would happen if you did that?
Every child does it.
What would you do?
My mom and dad were Well, you'd go and say, Mom said it was all right for me to do this, and Dad would say, okay, fine.
Mhm.
Because if Mother said it was all right, it was all right. And
Mhm.
my dad was very much in love with Mom and very much involved with her. So, but you know, you'd have to make a bald-faced lie of it, I suppose, and he would probably go along with almost anything you said if you assured him that that's what Mom was willing to let you do.
Mhm.
You know, unless it was really out of line, then he maybe check. But not a good thing to do because they were in communications regularly. So
Yeah, yeah.
usually didn't work out well.
Hey, gosh, I had a really great question, and I forgot it.
Yeah, you should-
Ah! Is there any discomfort with respect to talking about your family?
No, no, none at all.
No.
Love them all.
What do you feel? Do you feel sorrow, happiness, any?
Well, you know, my mom and dad are both dead, and that's sad.
Mhm.
But they lived a good life, and I certainly enjoyed being their child, even though we had our ups and downs.
Mhm.
And you know, everybody dies.
Yeah. What's the one thing that you would change about your parents? Say if you would change anything about your mom, what would you change?
Well, I think if I could do anything for my father, it would be that he had quit smoking at an earlier age, because he probably would have lived a little longer.
Yeah.
But he just couldn't. He could do everything else, but he couldn't blow that habit off.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he died of a heart attack at work. So
At what age?
62. He
62.
didn't quite draw Social Security,
Whoa.
which was always one of my big goals. Get my money back from Social Security.
And your mother, what would you change about your mother?
Not an awful lot. Mom was a pretty woman. She was very talented. She was a singer. She was a hard-working person. If anything, I guess that I would change on her, she had a time in her life when she had rashes that were probably stress-induced. And if she didn't have had to have that, I think would have made her life a little bit happier.
Mhm.
But she was an unbelievable person
Mhm.
and very, very holy, wonderful mother.
You guys were all raised Catholic?
Oh yeah,
Very,
Yes, yeah.
very Catholic.
very down.
Did
My
you ever?
mother was probably at church every day,
Wow.
I would think, or when she could. When she had the youngsters, she couldn't, of course, but as she got older, she probably went to mass every day of her life.
You guys were the founding members of your
St.
church.
Cyril's, that's true. In St. Cyril's, my brother and I served the first mass at the newly formed church, and it was the first mass was set over at Fort Lowell School,
Mhm.
and Larry and I served. Knew nothing about what we were doing,
But you were doing it.
but we were there. Yeah, we stood around, and did
Uh-huh.
very little, but we were servers. And that the day when everything was Latin, so it was
Mhm.
that had to be learned.
Wow, in Latin.
Yeah.
Wow. Let's move into your teenage years. What was it like for you as a teenager? You said you were rebellious.
Yeah,
Seemed like you
well,
wanted to be
I left
independent.
home at 15, or a little after that, and went to Florida. I pretty much decided, a couple of my friends, Spook and Art Knickerbocker, Ken Harris and Art Knickerbocker, were going to leave home and go to Florida, and they were about my age, maybe a little older. And so I went with them. I didn't run away from home, however. My mom and dad knew I was going.
Mhm.
I just didn't like school. I didn't want to be in school, and I wasn't getting anywhere as far as I was concerned. So I thought seeing the country would be a far better idea.
Mhm.
So we left and went to Florida. And when we got to Florida, the idea was when we left, we all decided we were going to work our way across. Well, instead of doing that, when we got down to El Paso, we picked up Ken Harris's uncle, who was a bum, basically. He
Mhm.
was an older fella who really was kind of like us. He was bumming around all the time.
Yeah.
And he went with us to Florida. And he wanted to get where we were going at all costs, even to the point where we hawked our spare tire
Oh,
to
jeez.
get gas enough to get to Miami. So when we got to Miami, we had nothing. We had the car, and we were pretty much broke. So I went down one side of the street looking for a job, and I got a job as an usher in a movie theater. And Ken Harris went down the other side of the street, and he got a job washing dishes in a restaurant.
Uh-huh.
And the other two guys couldn't find a job.
Hmm.
They, of course, wanted to go into manufacturing or,
Something
you
bigger.
know, something where they'd make a whole lot of money, and all I wanted to do was eat and have a room over my head.
Mhm.
So we were able to support those two while they were looking for the big job.
Did they ever find it?
No, they finally decided that they couldn't do that, and that they were going to go up into, I don't know, Carolina or Georgia or something. And I said, this is ridiculous, I'm not going with you guys, you know, this is
Yeah, you're
stupid.
supporting.
So I stayed in Florida, and the others left,
Mhm.
and they went on up the coast.
And
Well,
you were
then,
15 years old at the time.
I was probably 16 by then, yeah, it was pretty much a little after I was 15 and almost
Uh-huh.
16 when I left home.
Were you ever scared?
No, I don't think so. Never, you know, I didn't think anybody'd ever want to hurt me. It was never entered my mind, I think. And I suppose things were a little bit different in my day and age than they are today. You didn't have all of the communications that you have today, which tells you about every little person that gets hurt and all the horror that's out there in this wide world. So when you're in a smaller world, and that's basically what I was in, you didn't see a lot of that. And so it never really was there. Now everybody's paranoid.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, walk down the street, they get paranoid over that. When I was a kid, we didn't have those problems. We were gone all day. Our parents didn't have any idea where we were, didn't really care. And we all came home at time and probably late and got chewed out for missing dinner or
Mhm.
didn't get some in some cases. But it was never, you know, my God, somebody's gonna kill you if you're out there after 6 o'clock at night. I mean, it just wasn't that kind of a life.
Mhm.
It was a small town attitude, I guess, in a big city.
Mhm.
And I'm sure that there were people out there that would do that, and I'm sure a lot of that was happening. But the real odds of you as an individual getting caught up in something like that are unbelievably small.
Yeah.
You know, they're just not there.
But yeah,
And
we see
so,
them all the time.
Today, though, every time you turn the TV on, they're showing how somebody got killed and yada yada. And of course, they're handing lots of guns out to little kids now, so that they can go out and shoot up their classmates and all that
Mhm.
sort of thing. And we didn't have any of that going on in those days. If you looked at I believe there was I don't know what you call it, but a thing where they were saying, what are the 10 worst
Like a
things you
study?
have to worry about in school as far as discipline. And it was like chewing gum and messing up the hallway and maybe putting the girl's pigtail in an inkwell, or, you know, that was
Yeah.
the kind of things that they had problems with. And then 20 years later, they want to use, you know, disarming my students when they get in here and that sort of thing.
It's a
Pretty, you know,
whole different
you know,
life.
waiting for the guy to shoot me or tear up my car outside before I go home. So there's been some changes in the way people think and
Mhm.
children think.
Uh-huh.
And so in those days, it just wasn't as wild as it thought. But and I don't think I was ever
Like,
in danger, and I don't think I ever really thought that much of it. One night, a group of us were out, and I do remember, which was a kind of an unusual thing, never happened to me before or since, but these guys all began to talk about robbing a gas station. And this was maybe a month or two after Harris and the rest of them had gone up, and I was out with these guys. They were from my work at the Dixie Theater.
Mhm.
And I said, and they said they were gonna do it, and I said, you guys are serious, you're talking about, we were all joking around. I said, that's crazy, and I got out of the car at the stoplight, and I said, you do what you wanna do, and you people are crazy. And it was about a 3 or 4 mile walk back to where I was living, and it was, I don't know, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, or midnight, or whatever it was, but it was late in the evening.
Uh-huh.
And they drove off, and I was walking down the street, going the same direction they were, and I got up by this gas station, which was several blocks ahead of me, probably 15 minutes of walking time, and these guys were all, the
Robbing?
cops had them.
Wow.
No, the cops had them. They made, I guess, a really big mistake, and they got caught. And one guy was laying over the hood of the car, and the rest of them were in handcuffs, and they were patting him down.
Ooh.
So, you know, you could get in trouble, obviously, if you wanted to, but if you had any sense, you didn't,
Huh, huh.
you know.
Huh. My gosh. Who was your first boyfriend? Well, girlfriend, sorry. Who was your first girlfriend?
Well,
Or when did you discover
your
girls?
mother was my only.
Hey now, hey now.
I will tell you, the truth.
Mom's sitting right here watching.
The second grade.
Second
In
grade.
the second grade, there was a girl named Beverly something or another in that, not O'Connor, because that was the other girl.
Uh-huh.
But Beverly.
The other Beverly.
Yeah, the Beverly / Irish girl,
Uh-huh.
who she wasn't my girlfriend because she didn't have a use for me,
Uh-huh.
but she's the first girl that I was attracted to.
What attracted you to her? What was it about her?
She was a girl. I have no idea why God sets us up the way He does, but she was
Second
the
girl.
first girl that I really, gave a box of candy to and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next girl was in Arizona, and that was Beverly O'Connor.
But
You have two Beverlys. And why your sister's name is Beverly, I don't know. But anyway, Beverly.
Boy, you really fooled Mom in thinking it was Aunt Beverly, huh?
And her too, my favorite aunt in the world.
Meant to have a
That-
Beverly.
That's the Marine's wife, Paul,
Uh-huh,
we mentioned earlier.
Uh-huh.
So, yeah, those three girls are probably three of my earliest memories of girls,
Of Beverly's.
and they were all Beverly. So
Oh boy, your first
I
girl
thought
is
that-
Beverly.
That's right.
Boy, your wife loves you. Okay. Are there any other childhood memories that you can remember, maybe in the military? What was, I know you went to Vietnam. How far after you got into the military did Vietnam happen?
Oh, well, I'd been in several years, probably, well, I met your mother in '63, I went in '54, so it was '64 when I was about 10 years into it, so I
Okay.
was halfway through my career.
So,
when I
so
was-
why don't we first, instead of talking about that, because I'm going to put you and Mom together to talk about your married years, talk to me about before you met Mom. What was your life in the military like?
Well, I joined the Marine Corps at 17. Earl Max Miller was a friend of mine down in Florida, who was, birthday was March the 10th.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the day we went in the Marine Corps. Mine was February the 24th, so I waited for Earl.
Mm-hmm.
And we went in and went to boot camp together.
So that he could turn
Parris Island.
17 on March 10th?
Right,
Okay.
that's right. That's why we waited
Uh-huh.
till March rather than me going in on my birthday.
Uh-huh.
We went to Parris Island and we were in the 7th Battalion. And we lived in squad tents
Mhm.
about the whole time I was in boot camp, except for an odd week or so, we lived in tents down there. Was challenging, but after about 2 weeks, I really liked it. I enjoyed boot camp more than, maybe everybody says how hard it is, but I liked it. It was hard, it was steady. I didn't qualify with the rifle, which was one of the reasons I didn't become the platoon.
What do you mean? I don't understand. What do you mean you didn't qualify for the
You
rifle?
go out and you shoot a rifle and
it
you
was
have
for
to get
target.
a certain score,
Uh-huh.
and I didn't qualify. And
Oh.
a Marine is not much without his rifle.
Hmm.
So it took me a little longer to become proficient with it. I did eventually, but at boot camp, that cost me the Marine, what do they call it? The platoon,
Leader, master.
well, platoon PFC or whatever. I was promoted to PFC, but I didn't make the first rank guy. I had the best 15 and 45-day tests. I came in first on that, but without qualifying with the rifle, there's no way that I was going to make whatever I can't remember the name of the guy.
The thing you didn't make.
The winner.
Yeah,
The
yeah, yeah.
best guy. The
Uh-huh,
best guy in the
uh-huh.
platoon. Honor man.
Most
Yeah,
valuable
honor-
Marine.
Honor man.
Honor man?
Yeah,
Is that what
honor
it's called? Okay,
Honor
honor
man.
man.
Yeah,
All
So
right.
I didn't make that.
But-
Earl did.
Earl? Oh, Earl
Earl
did.
Max
Isn't that
did.
funny? So there was
He
a couple.
qualified and came in second on one test and third on the other.
Uh-huh.
And Earl Max Miller was the honor Marine for our platoon, which was just fine with me anyway.
Huh.
Earl went into artillery, and I went into the grunts or the infantry, and I was in '03
Mhm.
for the first 7, 8 years I was in the Marine Corps.
Mhm. Mhm. Wow. So you decided this is where you'd like to be, and
No, it didn't work like that. I'm not much of a long-range planner. I never have been. I went in for 3 years. I was looking for a 6-month hitch, to
Wow.
begin with, because I didn't know if I'd like it.
Uh-huh.
And I ended up liking it, and Miller, who was gonna make a career of it, got out early. So you just never know how things are gonna be. But I was just kind of stumbling along. About 14 months, we went down to Puerto Rico, to Vieques, Puerto Rico. When I got out of boot camp, I went to Lejeune, went to Vieques, Puerto Rico, and played infantry down there. Came back, went to school at Courthouse Bay on heavy equipment, road graders, tandem rollers, things
Mhm.
like that. Came back from that, and they had a deal where you could extend for a year and go to Washington D.C. and be a guard, an MP
Mhm.
on the various installations there in the Capitol. And this one old gunny sergeant there talked me into doing it, so I went there and spent about 2 years or so there.
Mhm.
And then I re-enlisted and went to the West Coast and did the same thing there. I was an MP at the Marine Air helicopter base over here that's now closed
Okay.
and weed ridden, which is really sad to see.
Read. So when, how far after were you in the military when you met Mom?
Well, from there I went to Okinawa.
Okay.
I spent a tour in Okinawa, came back from Okinawa.
What was that like, Okinawa? That seems kind of like.
Well, I was a grunt there, and we ran up and down the hills, and I was a sergeant, so I ran a squad or platoon on occasion. We had one little fracas where we had to get aboard ship and go over to the Persian Gulf. They were having a war over there of some kind, and we were going to go join it. But
Were you ever scared of dying or what? What?
no, I'm too young to worry about that nonsense.
Really?
I was made of stone at that time. Superman.
Superman.
You know, that's the last thing you worry about,
Really?
because there's nothing you can do about it. You worry about what you can do something about,
Uh-huh.
and that was the least of anybody's worries.
Uh-huh.
So at any rate, we went from there to back to Okinawa, and then I went back to the States, and I ended up in Barstow.
Ugh, that's an armpit.
Well, I was running a horse barn up there.
Oh.
Really liked it because I'd had some experience with horses before I
Mhm.
got in the Marine Corps.
So would you say that was your hobby, horses?
Well, yeah, you could say I did a little jockeying. So
Uh-huh.
anyway, I I ran that for about a year, and then I shipped over again. Time was up, and I went to Memphis, Tennessee, to become a helicopter mechanic because I was getting a little older, and I was thinking I'm tired of walking so much. And I knew that the next thing that I would do is go back out and be in the grunts again and
Uh-huh.
run up and down the hills. So now I'm getting to be 26, 25, whatever. And so I thought maybe I'd rather be a helicopter mechanic. So I went on and went to Memphis, Tennessee, and went to school for helicopters.
Uh-huh.
Then I went out to the West Coast.
This is all before you even had your GED, right? You didn't even have a high school diploma before this?
No, I didn't have any high school diploma.
Uh-huh.
And I got there, and that's when I started going to school.
Uh-huh.
And I went.
Why
to
was that
school-
important to you?
What, school?
Yeah.
Well, you get a little older, you start thinking, well, maybe it will help me if I can get a high school diploma to get promoted to do better in service.
Uh-huh.
So you begin to think a little bit past the end of your nose.
Uh-huh.
So that's basically why I went ahead and got my
Now, had
went
you
to
met
school.
Mom by then?
No,
or-
no, no.
So you had your GED before you met Mom?
Well, I graduated from Santa Ana High School.
Oh, I didn't know you graduated from Santa Ana High School.
Yeah, well, that's where my
Yeah.
degree or my
Diploma.
comes from. But I actually went to school at the Santa Ana Junior College.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And once that was done and over with, I was picked, or I went on recruiting duty. I went back to Parris Island, went to school for recruiting duty, then went to New York and New Jersey, and that's where I met your mother.
Were you looking for a wife when you met Mom?
Yeah, I was ready to get married.
How did you know you were ready to get married?
I was ready to get, I knew I was. I mean,
Like, how do you know? How did you know?
I was ready to get married. I was looking for a woman.
Mm-hmm.
I'd done enough running around. I thought it would be nice to have a family and settle down to some extent.
Mm-hmm. What was your relationship with your family during this whole time after you were 15? Did you call them? What was your contact
Oh, yeah,
like?
yeah, I sent money home until I was married
Uh-huh,
to my mom and dad,
uh-huh,
because they had all the kids at home.
uh-huh.
And,
How often did you see your brothers and sisters?
oh, once a year maybe,
Mhm,
or less.
Mhm.
I always had more leave on the books than I knew what to do with.
mhm,
Every time I shipped over, I got paid for 60 days, which is the most you could keep. So I
mhm.
didn't do a lot of, I didn't go on leave a lot. Um, I was not real interested in being at home.
What was it like when you'd be gone for so long and you come home? Did it?
Example would be, showed up about 5 in the morning, and my dad went to work real early,
Mhm.
and he was sitting in the house, and I walked in, he looked up at me, he said, "Did you bring the paper with you?" He didn't quite know how to. My dad was funny. He would say funny things when he was caught off guard. Did you bring the paper in? That's what he asked me. But it was always nice to come home, and everybody made a big fuss over me and all that stuff.
Uh-huh. Did you feel connected to your family?
Oh yeah, always. I felt like, and I always have felt connected to everybody that I'm involved with. I don't have feelings that I'm not accepted or not. I just assume I am.
Mhm.
And you have to tell me that I'm not.
Yeah.
And I just assume I am.
Okay, to the best of your recollection, up until before you met Mother, what was your philosophy of life? Can you remember that?
Oh, I want to live fast, die young, and have a good-looking corpse. Just being a Marine, it was, I was a Catholic. I was a practicing Catholic almost all of my life.
Uh-huh.
There were times when I skipped, but very few, and not for very long.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So I had that as my philosophy, I guess, from my Corps, that and the Marine Corps.
Do you ever question Catholicism?
Well, I wouldn't say I question it, because I'm not a deep thinker, a person who goes around trying to put all of the things together. It just doesn't make sense to me to take my limited time on this earth and decide that I know more than 1900 years of Catholicism, or whatever, 200 years of my country and that sort of thing. I say this all goes back to my core belief that we're here to help the country and our families to prosper.
Mhm.
We're not here for our own self-edification entirely. And so while you want to enjoy yourself on life, I find that if that's your only goal, that you're a pretty shallow person. You don't have much going for you.
Mhm.
And for me to decide that people who have lived the Catholic lifestyle for the last 1900 or now 2000 years,
Mhm.
that by now they would have picked it apart if it didn't have some pretty substantial ribs. And I didn't think that I was the one who was going to find those holes and destroy it. So I probably would go along with that, the teachings of the church, on almost every occasion. But I suppose too that I have my own thoughts, and then every once in a while I don't 100% agree, and I'm not a blind follower
Mhm.
of anybody ever, and I won't do things that I think will put me in harm's way for no reason.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that's my philosophy of life, I guess, is that anybody who thinks they're that smart, if they can determine what's right and wrong for themselves without using this model that's laid out for them, I find it pretty egotistical.
Mhm. What about like other churches then? I mean, there's been other.
I think that the other churches are just fine.
Okay, so it's not.
I don't see me being a Protestant.
Mhm.
I don't see me being a Buddhist.
It's just about being individual.
I'm more individualistic, but I'm a Catholic individual.
Mhm.
Is what it boils down to. In other words, that's where I lead or tend towards.
Mhm.
And but I don't see any reason for some of the nonsense that you see people going around saying There's absolutely no God, and I know it because I am 22 years old, or 28 years old, or 35 years old, or 60 years old, so therefore I know all this stuff. It's just utter nonsense. It's like the Darwinian theory being used as a model for human lifestyle when it's based on the animal kingdom, which is a very harsh environment where only the fittest survive, and that's what Darwin says. And people want to use that as the model for the way they live their life, and so they could get away from having to owe
Spirituality.
God certain parts of their life and certain duties, so they don't have to do that. And yet, so then I guess that when they get older and they're no longer worth anything, they should simply be shot. And if they're young and weak, they should be eaten by the rest of us, because that's the way Darwin's theory works.
Yeah.
And I don't want to get involved in that as my way of life.
All right. Is there anything else you're thinking?
Not really.
I want to end with this strange.
I'll wait with your questions.
Okay. Well, I want to end with this one question. What do you feel inside your body right now?
Old.
All right. Thank you, Dad. Tell me what you're saying.
What you need to have to be even is so much more than I needed. If you think about it, all of the electronic gizmos that you have today, including a TV, weren't I mean, they were invented, but they weren't out here in great numbers. There was no computers. There were none of these cameras. There were some little brownie box cameras that people took an occasional picture with. There wasn't a lot to spend money on, really, except, and a lot of people raised their own food. My dad raised a lot of food when we lived in Ohio, and a lot of people, lived in this country, lived on farms or large lots where they did a lot of their own food raising. There wasn't a lot that you needed money for, really. You got to where you needed a car, you had to pay your taxes. But taxes were even really cheap up until the Second World War came along. So for you today to step out and support yourself, it's vastly more expensive than it was when I was a kid. Just a house. This house that we're sitting in now, if I were to rent it from somebody, would be about $1,400, $1,500 a month. Well, that's a lot of money when you think about it as to what you have to do to earn it. And so if you find yourself in that situation, like I was, where I got a room for $10 a month down in Miami. It was one room.
Yeah.
Granted, it wasn't a big place. It was just a hotel room, but it was only $10 a month. I had food that I ate across in this little diner, and I paid them when I got paid on payday. And just ran a running tab with them. And it wasn't that much money. It just wasn't that much money. And I didn't have much left over at the end of the month, probably like you, but I don't know of anybody today who could go get a job as a movie usher and support themselves.
Yeah.
But I did. So that's why I'm saying that things are different. You have to have all of these gimmicks, these phones, cell phones. You got to have, computers. You got to have TVs. You got to pay luminous amounts of money for electricity and water and gas that was much, much cheaper when I was a kid. So that's the difference in the world then and now.
Interesting. Let's start by, hello, Mother.
Hello, daughter.
You want to start by giving your name to...
Shirley, my name is Janet Faye Rita. Rita's my confirmation name. Strive Leahy.
Okay. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about your family and how you grew up. And first of all, I want to kind of ask, who was around you when you were a child, about 3 or 4 years old? Who do you remember?
When I was a child, about 3 years old, my family lived above my dad's dry cleaning establishment. And who was around my sister, who was 19 months older than I. And there was a gal that lived behind. Her name was Janet Piskalik. She and I became very good friends even before we started school. And quite ironically, the first place we lived, the last time I was in St. Louis, which is my home, where I was born anyway, it's not my home now, but we went to the building where I spent the first 3 or 4 years of my life, and it has been converted into a restaurant. And that was quite a thrill to go there and say, wow, this is where I started. So that's a little touchy history for me.
Huh.
Changed a little bit, obviously.
What were your earliest memories of like your grandparents or toys you used to play with or events that?
Well, my earliest memories of my grandparents, where they lived right next door to us after we moved up the street a ways to 4945 Teeman Avenue. And our grandparents had a house right next door to us. And our Aunt Phyllis, and everybody called her Snooks, was a teenager at the time. She used to babysit for us a lot. And Grandpa and Grandma had a pet pig called Snow White. Well, when they bought it, it was a little bitty pig, which was fine. It could sleep under the stove. But then finally, Snow White grew up, and Grandpa had to take it off to some farm. And he assured us that Snow White would live out her life nice and long. And we felt a little guilty every time we ate bacon after that for a while. Are we eating Snow White? Well, you weren't, though. So, but that was quite a fond memory. And I remember we used to have parties. And for some reason, we have some movies, home movies, where we had a pony. And I'm not sure where that pony showed up from. We'd have a pony ride around. I don't know if it was just for parties or not. We had a lot of nice, fun memories. Our Christmases we always had a lot of toys. And my grandfather invented a revolving Christmas tree, which we didn't think much about it. But had he patented the idea, I think all of our family would be very rich today. But it's in our movies. We have a moving, revolving Christmas tree. He was a very handy man. He worked for General Electric.
Were your parents well-to-do?
Well, I wouldn't say we were well-to-do. My mom had a thing about robbing Peter to pay Paul. She was very good at figures. In fact, if you find an empty envelope or anything in the house, it would always have a bunch of figures on it written down. And she managed to make do. And if there were a few times I found out much later in my life that when things got real hard, that my aunt and Uncle Bill and Aunt Marie Aunt Marie was my mother's sister, would loan them some money. That didn't happen too often, but it did happen on occasion. And we never lacked for food. We always had good food in the house. Sundays afternoons, that was a big day for having cold cuts. We'd all make sandwiches. My mother was a good German cook. I mean, she really loved to cook. In fact, I never realized how German I was until I moved away from St. Louis, Missouri. All the streets, they were Eilenberger, Heidelberg, Grabois, Siebert. I mean, they were just German. And most of my friends had German names, so I was really brought up in a very sheltered area, if you will, as far as nationalities go. And I still can't speak German. Big eights.
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
Tell me about your relationship with your parents. First your mom and then your dad.
First my mom. Okay, well my mom, she was a very hardworking woman. And I look back, and if anybody, we could be considered latchkey kids because we did bring ourselves up. We spent a lot of time at my dad's dry cleaning establishment, which was right around the corner from our house. We'd go there and we'd help sometimes. We'd brush the trousers, the pants. He didn't do the actual dry cleaning on site, but he did do the pressing. And so we spent a lot of time with him at the dry cleaning place. And Dad, he was a belonger. He belonged to every group and organization there could be. In fact, he was quite an entertainer. He played the piano. He used to play professionally. Before he was married, he used to play on one of the entertainment boats that went up and down the Mississippi River.
Oh.
So he was really good.
Tell me about your relationship with him.
With my dad? Well, my dad, his name was Clarence, but everybody called him Mickey. In fact, his cleaners was called Mickey's Cleaners. And he always had a black panel truck that he did his deliveries in. He was a very short-statured man, and he would take me around entertain people with him. The different groups usually he belonged to. The Oddfellows and I can't even think of Optimists, and gosh, so many different groups, Lions, you name it, he belonged to it. And he would introduce me as his homegrown corn. I was about 7 or 8 years old, and I'd be leading, singing, like Put Your Arms Around Me, Honey, and I'm Looking Over 40 Clover, and Darktown Stars Ball, and all those old songs. I mean, they're really old now, but they were even old when I was young.
What about your relationship with him beyond the entertaining?
Well, he was a good man. He wasn't very lovey-dovey. In fact, he was I'll never forget one time when he was a fire chief with a volunteer fire department. He was the fire chief. And this one day we're all in this line of traffic, and he had a friend of his up in the front car that was in front. So he reaches underneath the dash and hits the siren. And we all yell, "Dad!" And he just takes off. Everybody pulled over for him. So he says, "Okay, I'll go." And he went. So that he was a character in many respects.
Did you ever want anything from him?
Did I ever want anything from him?
Did you want him to be more loving, or?
Well, he just was a very matter-of-fact guy. In fact, later on, I can remember one situation when I came home. I wanted to surprise my parents coming home. I was in the Air Force for 9 years, and I hadn't been in too long, and so I was going to come home and this big, I'm here, and my mother's reaction was, "What are you doing here?" And my dad says, "Oh, it's you." So, I mean, it was kind of a pop my bubble type time. But no, I don't know. Neither one of my parents were very lovey-dovey. I mean, they were not huggy types. In fact, I can't really say I've seen my parents, I never see them kiss that much, or even for that matter, show that much affection. But obviously, they had 7 children, so they had some affection at one time or another. But that's just the way they were. I mean, that's just the way I was brought up.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as wanting anything from them, I can't really think back on what I really wanted from both of them,
Yeah.
I think.
What about your mother?
Well, like I say, she was quite a character. I mean, I have a lot of memories about her that now I can look back and laugh, because I really and truly have gone through all the process of forgiving her for all the little aches and pains that she may have caused me emotionally.
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting statement to me. How did that forgiveness come about? How were you able to do
Just
that?
through prayer. I mean, I think, just opening up and finding out that the truest way to gain forgiveness is to forgive. And I really feel that in my heart I have forgiven all of those who have transgressed against me in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And believe me, I don't think it was anything real serious, obviously, because I'm here. So I feel in my heart I have forgiven them all, and I can look back on some of these memories with just kind of a laugh, because some of the stories are kind of funny.
Can you give me examples of?
Oh, well, one thing, when my girls, they say, "Oh, Mom, you're embarrassing me," I've told them this story more than once, how I went shopping with my mother for a swimsuit. And it's just unbelievable, but this really happened. I was about 13 years old, just developing, and my mother had me in trying on different suits. Well, a friend of hers happened to be in the next stall with her daughter, and so I opened the door up to show my mother the suit I just put on, and she's talking to her friend. She said, "Well, I have to buy Janet a suit that makes her look like she has more on top." And she says, "She doesn't have much on top." And unbeknownst to me, I'm standing there very unsuspectingly, and she grabs the top of my suit and pulls it down and says, "See?" And then of course I grab it. "Oh, Mother!" Very humiliated. But that was just an example of some of the things that she would do that would just drive me up a wall.
Uh-huh.
And
Was that with all the kids?
I think she was that way with all of us. I didn't see any different behavior with any of the other ones. She just treated us all equally. And like I said, we more or less raised ourselves, because she was always busy at the cleaners. I can remember my younger brothers, they actually grew up in a playpen in the back of the cleaners, which that the tale that happened there, because of the dry cleaning business, we have a problem with some type of leukemia that seems to run in our family. Everyone tells me that it's not supposedly inherited, or it's not a genetic thing, but I really believe that we were genetically prone to it, and because we were exposed to these carcinogenics in the cleaning establishment, my mother died of this leukemia about almost 22 years ago now. My 2 brothers, one was 53 and one was 51, they just passed away in 98 of this same disease. And I found out between the deaths of my 2 brothers, they died within 42 days of each other, that I also had the same problem. But it's something that the doctor said I could have 5 to 10 good years, and I'm putting those together and say I'll have 15 good years.
Right.
And now that I'm 61 now, so that's pretty good. If I can, make another 15 good years. And by then they'll have a pill and I'll just pop it in my mouth and it'll all be better.
That's right.
Hold on.
How did the death of your brothers, where did it take you with respect to thinking of your past?
Well, I had fond memories of them both. In fact, I was always a terror. Needless to say, I was somewhat of a tomboy when I grew up. I used to, well, the kids, the little boys, my brothers were smaller than I, so we used to wrestle a lot, and they'd take all three of them to get to me, but usually I'd get the best of three of them at one time. Of course, then we all grew up, and my brother Terry, it was funny because he was the one that I was always kind of at odds with when we were growing up. Just we always get little, mostly verbal arguments, but then he and I turned out to be almost like identical twins. I mean, we walked alike, we talked alike, and we were just cookie cutters, except he was a boy and I was a girl. So we used to tell everybody we were twins the last couple of years. I'd go home and we'd say, gosh, you people look so much alike. So we told everybody we're twins. But there was about, I think there's about 6 years difference in our ages, but we had, no, I guess it was more than that. He just died when he was 51, he would have been 52. Yeah, I got 9 years difference in our ages. Yeah. You never like to age your brothers and sisters because of that age as you. I can never remember how old my mother was because I never used to put any ages on my mother. Yeah. I never thought about it.
You never thought about
how old my mother was or how old my father was. I know there was 15 years difference in their ages.
What was that like? They were 15 years.
Well, they just kind of worked. They did their own thing. They walked. He walked this way, she walked that way, and they.
What do you think brought your parents together?
I think that my mother, the stories that have been told to me, after my parents passed away, was that my mother set her sights on my dad because he was quite a catch in those days. Here was a businessman, a successful businessman. He had his own dry cleaning business on Gravois, and he was quite a dapper Dan, I understand. She just set her sights on him and she caught him. And she married him. He was 15 years older than her, and they weren't that young when they got married. And then Dad started where we had 7 kids, bam bam, and we all grew up. That was it. I mean, they, like I said, they weren't. I don't think it was a real lovey-dovey. I know it wasn't a lovey-dovey relationship, but they did have a lot of their own way, love and respect for each other.
You grew up Catholic?
Yes, I did, and the reason for that was quite a story. We lived fairly close to a Catholic school, and my mother always admired the way the nuns taught. Well, through the intercession of a lady who lived across the street from us, who was a very good parishioner at that church, we were enrolled in the Catholic school. And my sister got to 2nd grade, and her class was going to make their first Holy Communion, and then it comes out that we hadn't been baptized. Well, my mother says, fine. So 4 of us at that time. It was my sister Jackie, and I, and Philip, and Terry. The 4 of us went off and got baptized. And it was on a school day. Jackie's class attended the baptism. Yeah, it was baptism. And so I got baptized. And the silly thing I remember is I went back to my kindergarten class, and there was a candle on my desk. And she got to blow hers out, and I didn't. I don't know why that sticks in my mind, but it was a big celebration in my classroom. And then, I don't know why I didn't blow my own candle out, but it was so funny. After all these years, I still remember that she got to blow her candle out.
Was there any competition between you and Jackie, or?
Well, not really. She was a very mild-mannered individual. She didn't, she was a very giving, loving person. She still is to this day. But we get along real well. I mean, I really take advantage of her a lot. I know in our teen years, I did like a lot of teenage sisters. I would get up earlier and take her clothes and wear them that she had laid out and got all prepared. I mean, not that you've ever done that, right, Susan?
No, never.
Never. So.
Hey, who amongst your parents gave permission to go anywhere? Who would you go to, or who was the boss?
Well, I can remember. This is another really funny story. My mother, we used to have a movie theater around the corner from our house on Tiemann Avenue, and it was called the Annex, but our nickname we gave it was the Dump because it was really kind of a run-down place and it was not kept up clean-wise and everything. And my mother used to say, we'd always ask Mom, "Can we go to the movies, Mom?" we'd go to the dump, and she'd say, did you have a BM? And we say, we knew if we said yes, we could go, and if we said no, we couldn't. Well, actually, at that age, we didn't even know what she was talking about. We just knew that if we said yes, we could go, and if no, we couldn't. And it wasn't until I was in high school that it dawned on me what she was talking about. We're studying biology one day, and I'm looking at the book, and it says, bowel movement. I go, BM. Ah, that's what she was talking about. So that's one of the silly.
So then, can you say that story is indicative of the communication that was used at your house?
Well, I guess you could say that. You know, they would say we would figure out ways to get around what we wanted to do, and we'd do it. And we never really got in much trouble to speak of.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think we all, for 7 kids to grow up the way we did, I think we all did pretty well.
Did you guys talk about sex? Did you talk about?
No, that was, well, not really. I can remember getting permission to see a movie at school about sex and the facts of life. And boy, I'll tell you what, I think back, I can remember saying to my sister one time, Joni, she's 10 years younger than I. And then we have another sister who's about 4 years younger than Joni. And I said I was the worldly person. I'd already been in the service for a while, and I was going to sit down with Joan and make sure she knew about the facts of life. So I sat her down and I said, do you know about, sex and facts of life? And she goes, oh yes. She says, I'm going to tell Jane about it. Oh, I thought, oh, okay, fine. So that kind of let me off the hook. But as far as my mother ever talking to us about it, no. And then when I saw the movie in school, she was asking me questions about it. So she didn't really talk about it openly, no.
Your mother had a miscarriage.
Yes, to my knowledge, she had one. She may have had more, but this one particular one she had on Tiemann Avenue. I remember it because, well, I wasn't sure what was going on at the time. Then again, I was fairly young, but I was upset because I couldn't ride in the ambulance. I mean, that's of course, at that age, about 7 or 8, I think you focus in on yourself more than you do what's happening. But but she did have one miscarriage that I know of. She may have had more, but that's the only one I knew about.
Who do you communicate more like, your mother or father, or neither?
Well, I like to think that I'm a more open individual because I do, try to hug and, just show more love. So I had a tendency, and I say this past tense because I really stopped doing it. I had a tendency to yell and scream a lot, which my mother used to do that a lot. But I can almost remember, I don't remember the day, but I remember the incident when I got really upset with the kids, you kids. And I got so mad, I was screaming, and I felt like I was going to pop my cork, and my veins got real thick and all I did was get a big headache. And I thought, this is really stupid. I said, there's nothing in this world worth getting that upset about. And really, I think, and you can testify to this, I haven't been, that upset since then. I don't think
I would have ever classified you as a woman who yelled and screamed. That must have happened when I was... I remember you would get upset at us. Yeah. But I don't think I ever remember...
Yelling and screaming.
I would never classify you as a person who yells. Screamer. Yeah, no. Okay, well. So it's interesting for me to hear you say that.
I've had my yelling and screaming days, but believe me, when I realized it wasn't that wasn't a way to go, I stopped.
And that's how your mom communicated?
In a way, yes. Her favorite thing was standing at the bottom of the stairs in the morning to get the kids up, and she yelled. Picture this now: the girls' room was right at the top of the stairs, and the boys' room was down the hallway. Well, she'd stand at the bottom of the stairs and yell to the boys real loud. I won't even do that, but. And then finally, the girls would get so loud, tired of hearing her, we'd get up to get the boys up. I mean, but she'd stand at the bottom of the stairs and holler. So.
Funny. Oh boy. Oh boy. Where did you go to be alone? Or are you more of an extrovert and you need to be with people? Or
I took a psychology test one time and said I was an introvert.
Really?
And I go, yeah, right, sure, I'm an introvert. No, I like people. I really... But now, in my later years, I do enjoy being by myself. Mm-hmm. And I find I have a chair in the house that I just sit and I read in the morning. I try to read from my books, different prayer books and inspirational readings. And that's been my getaway time now.
Mm-hmm.
My younger days, I don't remember, wanting to get away.
You didn't need that.
if I got upset or something, I usually would maybe go to sleep. That was my getaway.
Wow. What did you want to be when you grew up?
You know, actually in the 8th grade, the sisters had us write down what we wanted to do. And I said I wanted to join a service, serve my country, get out and have a family. And the good Lord really helped me because I managed to do that. I served in my country for 9 years in the Air Force. Actually 9 years, 3 months, and 23 days. And enjoyed every minute of it, but I didn't regret getting out. I had been, then I got married, and, well actually I got married before I got out of the Air Force. I was married for a couple of years while I was still in the Air Force. And it got to a point where I had an option, I could get out or stay in, but my husband was over in Vietnam, and I really was becoming more of a woman waiting for her husband to return than a sergeant in the Air Force. So I decided to get out and just go and visit some of his relatives and get to know them a little bit better back in Ohio, and that was a treat. We have 51st cousins on his side. That's a lot of people. And then I went down to St. Louis and spent some time with my family in St. Louis. So then he came home, we went to California, and we've been here ever since.
Yeah. So you would say that you accomplished your childhood.
I sure did.
Yeah.
Had 4 beautiful children.
Gorgeous children.
Well, gorgeous children, yeah, lovely children.
Modest. Did you have any family mottos or rules or
Family mottos or
things
rules?
that were repeated by your parents or your kids? I know that repeat was one thing that.
Oh no, that was something that actually the kids. This thing we were almost every weekend. My grandparents, Grandma and Grandpa Oliver, would take us fishing, and we never really caught any big fish, but we sure had a good time fishing. We'd go to all the little dinky creeks, and Grandpa had this. I can remember one of his cars was a Dodge. I don't remember what kind of Dodge, but it was just a regular 4-door Dodge, and he would take that thing on roads that had boulders and rocks on it. I mean, you think it was a off-road car, just to find these out-of-the-way fishing holes. And we would go fishing regularly, and we'd sing songs on the way coming back. And but on one of the fishing trips, my brothers and I were in the car, and sisters, we were in the car. Then we only had, there were only 5 or 6 of us. I know Janie hadn't been born yet. But we saw this sign that said phone such and such 295, and we thought, well, how long can we remember PH for phone 295, which was the first part of the phone number. So we'd say repeat, and then we'd say, someone in our family would say repeat, and the other one would say PH 295. PH 295, that was it.
Yeah.
So that's our little thing. In fact, to this day, it's kind of it's an initiation to get in the family. You got to know repeat PH 295. So if you come across anybody that has any scribe in them from my side of the family, if you say repeat to them, they'll say PH 295. Right, Sue? Repeat.
PH 295.
You got it. Okay.
Were there any other like rules that your parents? I guess you said you kind of raised yourself, so.
I can't really think of any, hard rules. Don't kill yourself. I think that was that
was number one.
Understood.
What was it like for you as a teenager?
Well, we moved out from 4945 Teeman Avenue, which was in more or less like the city. In my 8th grade, we moved out to a place on Baumgartner, Old Baumgartner Road. This was a huge stone house, which was over 100 years old. It was about 3 houses away from a cemetery, which actually we used to celebrate Casper the Friendly Ghost was buried there. And so we moved out there when I was starting high school. And the first day that I went to high school, I came home and I cried because public high schools are not like Catholic grade schools. I just felt that they didn't respect the teachers, and there was just no discipline, and I really felt upset about it. And I can remember crying. But lo and behold, the good Lord helped me, and I managed to muddle through, and I got involved in the high school. In fact, there was only 68 students in my graduating class, so there were a lot of opportunities. No, I take it back, not 68, 86. I got those figures turned around. 86 in my graduating class. So there were a lot of opportunities to join clubs and groups. Just like my dad, I joined everything except the rejection club, I think, and the French club. I think those were the only two that I did.
Rejection club?
Projection,
Oh,
you know, where they
projection.
move the projections,
Okay, I think
Projectors.
rejection.
not rejections.
Oh, that's a good club not to be in.
Yeah, don't be rejected. But so I really had a lot of fun in high school, and there were about, well, I'd say 5 different groups of girls that ran around the school, and I belonged to 4 of the 5 groups. So that was quite a unique situation. I don't know how that turned out, but I was a bit of a wallflower as far as the boys were concerned. I didn't do much dating.
Why was
In
that?
fact, I found out later, this was kind of a compliment. At one of my class reunions, one of the guys came up to me and said, "Are you still into this religious stuff?" You know, so I think it was one of the reasons they didn't express, I don't want to say they didn't mess around with me, because they just knew that I was not into that, and that was the way they perceived me, which that's not a bad way to be perceived.
Yeah, yeah,
Got me through high school all right,
yeah, yeah.
so
Was it always your plan to be a virgin until you got married?
that was I never gave much thought, but that was my plan, yes.
Was that
I-
normal in those days? I mean,
Oh, well, I don't know, I didn't talk to many other girls about it, but that was my plan.
mhm.
And,
So girls didn't talk about it?
well, I mean, I can remember in high school, if the girls were engaged, when they were in high school, or if they were going steady, that was wow, that was something. If they were engaged, wow. And then if they planned to get married right after high school, which some of the girls did, they were really, oh, wow, you know. But as far as, you know, talking openly about your sexual relations with other people, I don't think there was much of that going on.
Yeah,
Maybe I just never heard it.
yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Boy, whole different time than when I grew up. Who was your first boyfriend or girlfriend? Talk about.
You know, actually, this is really true too. The first guy I really ever kissed, it wasn't that much of a passion kiss, was the man who's now my brother-in-law. We dated for 6 months.
Now I want to clarify a kiss in your book and
Well,
a kiss.
just a kiss.
Like
I'm talking about.
mwah.
That's it. That's it.
Uh-huh.
None of this
And
deep,
how old were you?
deep throat stuff, as you guys call it. I don't know. I was maybe 16 or 17.
Okay,
I don't
okay,
remember.
so that was.
But anyway, he and I went
This
out.
is
and
Uncle Gene?
Yeah, Uncle Gene. Yeah, and I can still. It was so funny. Quite a few years after my husband Kenny and I got married, we went home to visit, and Gene says to my husband, he goes, "Boy, you sure straightened her up, Ken."